Once you've decided if the content that you're creating is going to be public or private, it's important to be careful of how you create the content so that you are sure that it is either discoverable or not discoverable, that it is public or that it is private. So when you are creating a pathway, for example, if I go to create and I click on pathway, you have the option to fill in all this information about the pathway, and then you have the option to add a smart card. If you decide to build a new smart card within this pathway, this smart card will only ever be discoverable within the pathway. So for example, say I wanted to put a poll within this pathway, and I'm going to hit done. This test poll can only be accessed via this pathway. It cannot be discovered or searched for outside of the pathway. If you're creating a private pathway that you're only going to share with set users, it's a best practice to open the pathway and build the smart cards within the pathway. This way you can confirm that those smart cards are essentially locked to that pathway, and whatever settings you apply to the pathway will apply to that smart card. The opposite of this case is when you are creating smart cards independently from a pathway or a journey. So if I go to the Create button and I click Smart Card, any smart card that I create from this section is going to be discoverable across the entire platform. So in contrast to the private pathway, if I wanted to create a public pathway, I would click Create Pathway, scroll down, Add Smart Card, search for existing smart cards, and here I can discover any smart cards that have been created outside of pathways and are marked as public content, and I can add them to the pathway that I'm building. It's important to recognize this difference as it has implications for how your content is discovered and shared on the platform. Final example is that you might find yourself in a situation where some content in a pathway is private and some content in a pathway is public. For example, if you're creating a pathway with content that you'd like to be available to any user on the platform, however, you'd only like certain users to take a quiz to restrict who you are grading and collecting data from, you can build all of the public content in independent smart cards outside of a pathway, then create a pathway, add those external smart cards to the pathway, and then create a new quiz from within the pathway. So essentially, this is a combination of those two methods that I just went through, creating public smart cards versus private smart cards. You can combine those two scenarios if there is some content within a pathway that you want to be private, and if there's some content within a pathway that you'd like to be public. For example, in the Remote Foundations badge, all of the links to the handbook are discoverable public smart cards that have been created outside of this pathway. The quizzes within the pathway are private to the pathway and cannot be discovered outside of the pathway. Another reason why this is a best practice to create public smart cards outside of pathways is that they then not only become discoverable and accessible to the entire platform, but reusable. And so you can tag existing smart cards into new pathways as you build.